going back to the fear pyramid, you did all your base fears, your spiders, the dentist, flying, and then your middle ones, what were they?
Well, what happened is I started to overcome those fears, and as I started to overcome the mundane fears, I just become more aware. So my consciousness expanded. So I just became aware of things. I became aware that I was afraid of my wife. So I started to stand up for myself at home. I was afraid of my mum, so I started to stand up for myself. I was afraid of change. So I'd been in a shitty job in the factory for a long time, nights. I was working shifts, and it was very bad for your constitution. And I was afraid to leave it because it was good money, or I thought it was. So I left that job and just took a day job on a building site. And from that, I started to develop skills. I actually went from being an uneducated labourer to over the next few years to becoming a bricklayer. I'd learned how to lay bricks. But it was very, very hardy, very difficult, very physical. So I gave up that job. And then as I climbed the pyramid and overcame these fears, like I said, not just the fears on the pyramid, but the new fears that were being added to the pyramid, I reached the top fear. I've been into a karate tournament. I went and fought in Liverpool. I'm not a very good tournament fighter, but I went in and had about 7 fights. And I overcame that fear immediately. And then I was working on building sites. I was starting to teach. My classes were getting bigger. I was starting to teach the concept I'd learned. And then the final fear was the fear of violent confrontation. I was also recognised, Paul, that I was afraid of success because I didn't understand what it was. So it demanded that I educate myself to understand what success to me was. What is it you want to do? What's your dharma? What is it that you're here to do? What's your part of this grand plan? And I knew my part of this grand plan was to talk to people, was to tell stories. But I was too afraid to tell stories because my conditioning told me that I was a piece of shit, that I was nobody, and that people don't want to listen to you. Who would want to listen to you? But when I started to talk truth, which I'd found, certainties, people weren't really listening to me. They were listening to the energy that was coming through me. So I started to become a receptacle for truth. So I would start to talk truth in my classes, and I just started to get fat classes.
You were attracting people that want the right people, yeah.
Attracting people from everywhere. I was bringing. I never went into class, and I started to change all the training. We brought pads into the karate class. I'd always have a bag full of books. So I'd give people homework, read this book, watch this video, so they'd be inspired by different books. So I started, as well as teaching the physical karate, I started to educate people, give people stuff to educate themselves. I started to include judo, wrestling, Thai,
and this was when? Back in...
This is all before the UFC.
Yeah, late 80s, was it?
Yeah, before the UFC had been invented, I started to do animal day sessions, which was, let's forget about the rules, let's get rid of the rules, let's just have it in the dojo and see what happens. Okay, you're my best fighter, let's take the gi off, let's put you in a cagoule and a pair of clumsy boots, let's see how you do. And you'd watch your best fighter get strangled by a cord on his coat, and you'd watch somebody who can't breathe properly because he's got like an anorak on or something, or he can't maneuver himself properly because he's got shoes on, and you'd make people start from odd positions, you'd make people start from different positions. So we started to develop restriction training, things that would mimic a real situation. We started to get as close to a real situation as possible to give people a chance to look at this is how it's going to be. We started to do things like exposure training, and I didn't realise later on this is an old shamanic training. This is something they used to do in the very early days of lots of the kind of new age, the kind of serious end Gurdjieff type training, where exposure training was like where we just get people, I'd get you sat on a chair and I'd get someone in front of you just posturing, shouting, swearing, screaming, just to get you used to that kind of attack. People were used to doing physical stuff, but they weren't used to
the pre-fight.
They weren't used to the pre-fight because they didn't realise that sound is touch, just the same as me touching you with my fingers. Sound touches you. So people were being beaten by lesser fighters who were very good at sound. So I'd seen people who couldn't fight the tide in the bath, but they were beating legends just with sound, just with posturing, just with mudras, just by kicking off. They didn't even know what they were doing, but they knew it worked.
That was a big part of the fear as well.
Yeah.
When people used to come to your animal day, or when they
Yeah.
want to go into that training, because you were training them for what is now called reality self-defense. That was a big thing. I remember I don't know if it was you who made this expression. I think it was. You said to me, "You are only as strong as your weakest link."
Yeah.
And that was a big part of people's training. If you're good with a right cross, don't do it anymore.
So we would do
train something that you're weak at.
Yeah, we would. They call it in judo. They call it giving up the ippon-yari. It means you've got a great technique for 6 months. Don't use that technique. You're good at Osoto. You're taking everyone over with Osoto. For 6 months, you can't use Osoto. It forces you to find a new technique, to develop a new technique. And of course, after 6 months, you've got a new technique, and you've still got Osoto.
Yeah.
So I say to people, okay, you're knocking everybody over with your hands, let's just grapple, or let's just kick, or let's just kick and grapple. Or actually, you're a good kicker, you're a good grappler, you're a good puncher, but you're not very good at the sonic level. So I remember one of my friends coming in. It was a big, reputable, it was a world-class kickboxer, but he'd come into our class. He was a massive lump, and he worked the doors. He was a really, really effective guy. And I remember everyone giving him a good fight. So he just took them to the level of sonic. He just postured and made a few mudras. Before he fought my best fighter, he just went, boom, just went like that. Right, fucking, here we go. Let's fucking go then. Let's fucking go.
And that energy just must have...
Bang, my fighter just fell apart because it was sonic. And this guy went in and just pulled him apart like it was nothing. And it was just because he took it to the psychological level. He used a sonic attack, he used voice, he used sound. It was really interesting to watch. That doesn't do anything if you can bypass it, but if you don't understand it...
Lee Morrison is fantastic at explaining that.
I think Lee Morrison is probably the leading combatives guy in the world now. He's an amazing guy.
He does it not just with volume as well. He will show how people will do it quietly and from different locations, from Scotland to England. But it's that same sentiment of
the intention,
inciting fear in someone just through sound. So when you went to the top of the pyramid, your fear of violent confrontation, you suddenly were in good company on the door, weren't you? I mean, they really took you in. So how talk to us about that once you arrived at that top part of the pyramid.
It was I went out and did a couple of doors, just a couple of local doors, for football day and stuff like that, and it wasn't, they were just kind of there or thereabouts. And I had an old friend from my Kung Fu days who worked in one of the toughest nightclubs in Coventry, a place called Buster's. And he said, look, I can get you a job. I can get you on there for the night. He said, your black belt will get you in. I can do that. But he said, that won't last long. He said, you're going to have to prove yourself. He said, it's a tough door in a tough city. It was probably the toughest door in the city.
What was the saying about Buster's? You walk in with... What was it?
Oh, yeah, we search people for weapons and drugs, and if they haven't got any, we'll give them because it was that kind of club.
Or you come in, and there's another one as well, you come in for a laugh and you come up in stitches.
Oh, yeah. It was a very physical place. It was, it was like Sodom and Gomorrah and, Pompeii brothel all mixed into one. It was colourful.
And it was no joke. I mean, people really were killed in
I had 4 friends murdered in the environment while I was there. Not all on the doors. Some of them were killed on the doors. 2 of them were killed on the doors, and 2 of them were killed in the environment, adjacent to the doors. They were doormen who were going into other areas. But, 2 of Matty's friends were murdered in one night, my friend Matty.
And that was where you put yourself?
Yeah, we were there every night, so it was real. Yeah, you were being paid 4 times the day rate of 4 times the day rate of a skilled worker, and that's not for nothing. That's because somebody might kill you, and people were being killed. It was polled as the most violent city in Europe for its size and population. So at one point, even some of the hot dog vans had bouncers on because people would tip them up. It wasn't unheard of if the police turned up at a pub, they'd come out and the car would be on its lid. It'd be tipped upside down. It was a hugely violent place, and if you had to be capable of at least taking on the top guy in the city, which I wasn't
at the time.
Yeah, no, at the time I wasn't. You had to be capable of that because that might happen on the first night, and of course in the end, I ended up fighting some of the most reputable people in the city because they came up and they that was it. If you didn't defend your door, if you didn't stand your ground, you couldn't work again. You couldn't bottle it on the Friday and come back to work on the Saturday. Your job was gone.
So tell us about the journey then. So you arrived there. So this was the top of your pyramid.
Yeah, fear of violent confrontation.
Yeah. And then
I've got a lot of confidence. I'm teaching. I'm a second dan. I've got a class. I've got followers. People love what I'm doing. They think I'm tough, but I haven't done the doors, and I haven't confronted my final fear. So I go onto the door to confront this fear of violent confrontation. But I went on in the deep end really, because Buster's was the most violent club in a violent city. It had a fiercely strong door, like professional boxers, 2 professional boxers. Got John Anderson, who kind of transcended all the different arts. He was just a awesome Anderson, we called him, because he was just ferocious from about 8 inches. He was a phenomenal puncher. The police used to get videos of him knocking people out and watch them back and forward. How does he do that? What does he do there? And a lot of the police used to come and train with John and come and train with me.
It was his left hook, yeah?
Left hook,
a whisper.
Just very, very close, but he was a master at that kind of 18-inch range of talking, of quietness. He was like Clint Eastwood in black. He didn't say much. He only smiled twice a year, and he was very quiet. He never shouted, he never postured, but when he let that punch go, when you ever look at his gloves had a massive dent in the left hand here. I've never seen it before, where the knuckle had come through. He was ferocious from that range.
Didn't he knock someone out and from such a close distance that no one knew who did it, and people were taking ownership of the punch?
Yeah. There's a guy called 20 Neck that come in. There's a guy with a 20-inch neck, and he wouldn't leave. And one of the guys come up to John and said, he won't leave. And John said, you should have got him out. So what John used to do was he used to touch their drinking hand, their right hand, he'd have his left leg forward, and he would touch that hand. And if they let him touch the hand, he knew he could talk them out. And if they pulled the hand away, he knew he'd be fighting. So he went to 20 Neck and said, you've got to leave. And he said, if you want me out, you better take me out. He was a massive rugger player. Everyone was afraid of him in the city. And John said, you're either leaving or you will be carried out. And he goes, well, I'd like to see that. Kind of unparaphrasing. So John touched his hand, his drinking hand. So he said, you're not leaving. And as he pulled the hand back, John just let this left hook go. Very, very close range. And he hit the floor so hard, this guy, because he was big, that all the drinks jumped off the tables like that. And he just hit him and he landed, and no one knew who hit him because it was so close. And as he just said to Colin, get him out. And John walked back to the bar like a cool thing, and someone said to Colin, that was a great punch. And Colin went, that's very kind of you. He said he was so big they had to roll him out. They couldn't pick him up. But that was the kind of people I was working with. That's the kind of environment. If you didn't stand your ground, if you didn't defend the door, then you didn't work and you might die. So that was my first night. But I knew the first night that it was too much. It was too big for me. I've never been so afraid. Someone said, Buster's nightclub. I remember that. I spent 5 years there one night. That was the kind of place it was. It was a long, long night, because you could feel the adrenaline from your toes to your scalp all the way through the whole night. It was the most fierce experience. And I just thought, I kept thinking, we'll sit down and have a drink afterwards, and I'm just going to tell John it's not for me, but thanks, see ya, take it off my pyramid. And I sat down, I was just trying to build up the courage to say to him, I can't do this, John. And he goes, you did really well. He said, you're a bit of a greenhorn, but you did well. You stood your ground. You didn't let anybody walk over. You didn't embarrass us. That's the important thing, he said. He says, if you want to stay, I think he saw something in me. And I just thought, I was so elated by the validation. I thought, I'll just stay for a little bit longer. And I ended up becoming one of the main doormen there. Sometimes I was working 6 nights a week there.
So you... once you went into that fear and you stayed quite long,
yeah.
There's this is probably for another podcast, but the story of you, how long you stayed and what happened to you. And then
that's a big story. But the main thing was I went from being afraid of changing jobs. I went from afraid of a spider in the bath. I went from being afraid of change, from afraid of success, from afraid of my wife, to standing on a nightclub door facing monsters. And all I was there for was to look for truth. And the truth I found was much bigger than being able to knock someone out with the right hook. It was a much bigger. What I realised was it was a metaphysical experience. It was the greatest metaphysical experience of my life, because I wasn't defending the door of a club. I was defending the door to my causal will. So the causal will, or the causal body, is the last layer between the soul. It's the last level of protection. So if somebody takes over your causal will, which is your body of conscious will, or your conscious body, you lose autonomy. So most people lose their autonomy because of what they hear on the telly, because of what they read, their education. So their conditioning means their causal body, their autonomy, is always compromised. This job taught me how to own my causal will, and then when you own your causal will, you are free, because then you have intelligence, and then you have will. So you have the power of an expanded intelligence and the power of will. And once you've got those two things, they say that you're the king of the world. There's nothing you can't do. There's nowhere you can't go. So the experience was visceral, because it was about the physical thing. It was about learning how to knock people out. It was about learning how to control the endocrine system, how to control the endocrine system of other people, how to use sound, how to use projection, like mind projection, so we could use certain sounds to pull people out of their body and fire them into the future, and then bring them back to their body. So you could say to somebody, you're turning up at my front room. This is my house. This is my job. This is where I am every night. And you're fucking about. And you think you can do that. But I'm going to come to where you work tomorrow. I'm going to find out where you work tomorrow. And I'm going to come to your factory tomorrow. And I'm going to come in your canteen when you're having breakfast. How do you feel about that? So this guy is suddenly projected to tomorrow. He's in tomorrow. He's watching me walk into the room. Then he comes back to his body. And I say, do you want that? And he would step away and say, no, I don't want that. So you save this factory worker. You save this father or this son or this brother or this uncle. You save him by showing him but these were metaphysical techniques that we were doing because the environment taught us. Not because someone said, if you do this, this will happen. The environment taught me that. The environment that environment had its own egregore, had its own kind of being, which was greater, much greater than the sum of all its parts. So every piece of learning that's ever happened in that environment taught me how to work that environment. But in order to learn from that environment, I had to let go of everything I thought I knew. He said, you have to let go of everything. All the stuff you've learned, all the lineage, all the, the loyalty you've got to your teachers, all of the techniques, all of the years and years you spent in karate, you've got to let go of all that. You can't retain any of that. We're just going to show you what works. It's not either good or bad. It's not moral or immoral. It's not ethical. It's not ethical. It's not unethical. It's just what works in this environment. And if you get what works in this environment, the immediacy of sudden violence, if you learn that, we'll show you the skills beyond that. And the skills beyond that were not using sound to harm, but using sound to heal. Kotodama Gaku, the use of magic sound, the use of sound. And if you learn these techniques, these mudras to damage people, we're going to show you how to use these mudras to heal people and to guide people and to inspire people.
That was a whole other journey after that, because
didn't learn that till 20 years later.
So that would be a great another podcast to see what happened beyond the final step of your pyramid, which was, at first it was physical for you, and then it became much more spiritual. And there's another great quote from Tenzing Norgay, the Sherpa for Edmund Hillary. He said, we've now conquered Mount Everest, but we still have to live our lives. Yeah. Which I thought was a beautiful expression.
It's the Zen thing, isn't it? Before enlightenment, collecting water, chopping wood. After enlightenment, collecting water, chopping wood. So you have to live your life, but you don't live it the same way, Paul. The person that comes down from Everest isn't the same person that went up. The kid that came off the door isn't the kid that went on the door. The kid that went on the door felt there was monsters and enemies everywhere. The kid that came off it realised that the only monsters and enemies were in my own body and in my own mind. The person that went on there wanted to defend the world against these monsters and wanted to use violence to beat greater violence. The person that came off just wanted to leave everybody inspired and wanted to just work from a place of love, nowhere else. There is nothing else that's effective. There's nothing else I'm interested in. I've got no interest in anything. My whole life now, because now I've secreted myself to this lovely quiet location in this secret location in the middle of England. Now that I'm here, my whole life is dedicated to love. Nothing but love. Well, I tell these stories to show how I got here and to say that, when I first started doing the door and writing about it, people called me a thug. People said I was violent. Even really esteemed martial arts people attacked me. They didn't realise it was a metaphysical experience. That stuff was important. I'm like this. I'm like, if you look at the characters like St. Paul, Angulimala, people like St. Augustine, people like Milarepa, these were all, it lived, lives of vice. They were, especially Milarepa and Angulimala and St. Paul, they were violent people. They had very violent lives before their anointment. And people listened to them afterwards because they go, oh, that's Paul the persecutor. And he's talking about love. We've got to listen to him. This guy must know. That's Milarepa. He killed 32 people. I'm going to listen to him because, that's where I was. I was in that hell realm. And he's shown me how to get out of it. I'm going to listen to him because he knows. So there are certain people that will only listen to people like me. They're not going to catch it from a priest. There's certain people that won't be able to listen to me. But there are certain people that God's put me in front of because they will only listen to somebody with a broken nose and cauliflower ears and tattoos. They'll only listen to someone that's been in hundreds of fights. They won't listen to somebody that hasn't experienced that. So my experiences were unfortunate and many of them were unkind and they were very violent. But that's not how I live now. And my teaching now is more potent because of where I was. The more we've been buried in sin, the more potential we have to ascend. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, the top of your first pyramid was the start of your second pyramid.
Yeah, it became an inner pyramid then. Mm-hmm. Once I realised, though, I kept getting little graces. I was given these moments of clarity, these certainties, what my friend Wa'il would call Yakim. I kept getting these certainties, and these certainties opened me up to new potentials. And I realised that anything is possible. Everything is possible. I mean, I'm not here to do everything that's possible. I'm here to do what my Dharma demands that I do, what my blueprint asks me to do. So when you go into that spiritual environment, when you create that covenant with God, it goes, boom, here's Geoff Thompson. This is where he is. This is what he wants. This is his potential. This is his ability to work. This is the rate he can work at. And it just starts giving you the right book, the right instructor, some of them visible, some of them invisible, some of them corporeal, some incorporeal. And you start getting the teachings. And as long as you sit down and do the teaching and do the work, that instruction will keep coming. There's no limit to the level we can go, but we have to do the work. People don't do the work because they don't really know what to do immediately, but they don't really want to know what to do immediately a lot of the time because to ask for the truth means to give ourselves a workload. You're not going to be around the right people if you're not the right person. So you've got the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. So you've got to hear the teaching. You've got to live the teaching. You've got to be in an environment where the teaching is being lived by those around you. When I went on the door, my level went like that. It went through the ceiling because I was in the Sangha. I was in the environment. I was around people that existed on truth. What worked in that environment worked. Either it worked or you died. So you weren't around people that were point scoring or people that were, looking for accolades or validation. You were looking for people who knew that what they did worked or they died. That was how it was. So you learn quick. It's a fantastic environment. When I started, and then because I was the right person, Paul, I attracted the right environment. So first of all, we need to take the teaching. We need to be the teaching. The teachers won't appear until you are living it. You won't attract teachers until you're in that environment. If I'm on, Radio Mercia, I can't pick up Radio 1 or Radio 2 or Radio 4. I've got to change my frequency. When you change the frequency, you're automatically in the environment of people that will feel compelled to teach you. And if you take the teaching, if you take the instruction, they will feel compelled to give you more. Every time I've ever mentored people, the time I stopped mentoring them was when they stopped taking the instruction. You can't do nothing with them anymore.
Yeah, it has to come from you.
The moment they start arguing about the instruction, the moment they start questioning the instruction, the moment they stop taking it, I automatically know that they're going to fall away very quickly, and I'll let them. It's actually what is true is that what we say here is of no worth to anybody at all. They need to experience it. Then they can't take our word for it, and they shouldn't. All they should do is trust you enough to try it.
However, I must say, I agree with that, but I would say, and this is not a sales pitch, but books like this, it awakens something in someone who hasn't had that access to it. Maybe, like you say, they're from their backgrounds don't encourage this sort of thinking.
No, that's true.
And it's within all of us. So, especially because people can relate to you, reading this book, suddenly you think, oh, wow, okay, he's no different than me. And here's a guy that stood on a door and has done this and has done that. And he's talking about fear. I'm scared. Yeah. If he can say that, then it must be true. So, you have to go out and do the work. But I think these are great books.
Well, what this contains, what people don't realise is people think this is letters. That's spirit. So the Paraclete is in this book. Because I wanted to write the truth, the raw truth. It contains the Paraclete. The Paraclete is like the Holy Spirit, or the Comforter, or the Director, or the intermediate. So this will contain spirit, so that it's actually locked into the ink. The moment you pick it up and read it, if you feel inspired, that means the Paraclete has entered you. You've got the Paraclete, which is the spirit, which is like an antibiotic, and you've got the parasite, which is the negativity and the ignorance. When you take the Paraclete in, it's like dissolves the parasite. So the moment you start to take in spirit, you'll start to dissolve ignorance, and it will trigger a curiosity, and then the fear is automatically lessened, because the brain has a strange quirk. It can't deal with curiosity and fear at the same time. The moment we become curious and we go, oh, there's that feeling. Maybe I should look at that. Maybe I should examine that. Maybe I should follow that feeling. Maybe I should, this thing I'm afraid of, maybe I should just stand in front of it and see what it's got. See whether it's just, whether it's just all mouth, whether it's just posturing. I think I'm going to stand in front of it. I think I'm going to go and have a look at that. I heard the talk by a guy called, I think it was Andy Kaufman, who's one of the best screenwriters in the world. He come to BAFTA to talk. And he said, I've only come here today because I was very afraid to come, and I wanted to see what that felt like. Beautiful. And that was it. That was the whole talk for me. It was fantastic. I'm curious. And the fear has gone because I'm curious and I want to look at it. So there's a background of fear, but the curiosity overrid it.
And the whole world opens up when you cross that threshold.
Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, on that note.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.